let's talk to Bob Seeley, former Conservative MP, friend of the show, a man who quite often talks an awful lot of sense. Bob, a very good morning to you.
Morning, Mike. Morning to your listeners and viewers.
I want to just kick off with Joe Biden, if I may. I don't know whether you saw his speech. It was sort of in the middle of the night, so a couple of hours ago. Let me play a quick clip from it where he says that democracy has prevailed.
I stand before you now on this August night to report that democracy has prevailed. Democracy has delivered. And now democracy must be preserved.
Pretty funny coming from the Democratic Party, who have completely and utterly rode over with sort of clodhoppers and four wheels democracy by not allowing any of the Democratic members of the party to vote for who gets to run for president. I've been speaking to friends of mine in America who are really quite annoyed about it.
Yeah, I to be honest, I found it a bit difficult to watch Joe Biden because he was just getting worse and worse on camera because he didn't seem to know really where he was occasionally, and I thought it was a bit painful. So that speech, look, I was reading about it. That speech seems to have been better, but it's still not great. And I think he made the right decision to step down. For the good of American democracy, he should have made it at least 6 months earlier than he did, so that you'd actually have time to have a decent contest rather than handing it to Kamala Harris. But let's see.
But that's the problem, isn't it? Because, I mean, you know, whichever way you look at the US and its politics, you know, Kamala Harris doesn't appear to be somebody that I would have a great deal of sense of sort of faith in to be the Prime Minister. She hasn't even, to be the President, rather. She hasn't even had a press conference. She hasn't even had any proper sort of rigorous interview. Nobody really knows what her policies are. I'm quite worried that she might become the President. I still think Trump will win, but I'm quite worried that if she does become the President of the United States of America and the leader of the free world, we're all in a bit of trouble, aren't we?
Well, yes. I mean, look, I think you could say that about Trump as well. I'm not a fan of Donald Trump.
No, I know you're not.
And I do worry, about him. But I think both the leadership contenders, whether it's Biden and Trump or whether it's Kamala and Trump, I don't think they exactly fill us with a great deal of hope. And the problem is that, look, we have a bit of crisis of leadership in the Western world, and we need to get our leadership right in the Conservative Party. But I mean, I don't think Starmer fills many people with confidence either, with 34% of the vote. I mean, that was it was a landslide on numbers that you normally lose badly on. So let's see.
But it's even worse than that, isn't it? It's only like 20% of the country actually voted for it.
Yeah, Mike, 20% of all adults actually actively voted for the government that is now behaving like it's the most popular thing since sliced bread and can do what it likes. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think in Schulz in Germany, I think Macron in France has been an embarrassment. I think we have a crisis of leadership in the Western world, and I think it's at a really serious moment with the rise of China and terrible things happening in Russia and Ukraine at the moment.
Yeah, and of course the Middle East is still very much a powder keg, and it's time that we had sort of decent leadership in this country, whereas what we've got is David Lammy going to Israel, gets snubbed by Benjamin Netanyahu, doesn't even meet him. He then goes and meets the Palestinian leaders, having removed a badge that he had on his lapel, which was in sympathy with the Israeli hostages. So, I mean, you know, he's not exactly setting a great example, is he?
No, I think, look, I mean, you could say I would say this anyway, but I really think David Lammy's out of his depth, but you can say that about most of the Labour cabinet and probably the Prime Minister.
Totally. I mean, I did a big story yesterday and really, really upset quite a lot of people when it was revealed. And I know that, you know, we can have arguments about, you know, expenses for MPs and all of that. But for a government who have removed the pensioners' winter fuel allowance and have cancelled it for, you know, 8/9 of them, so none of them can get the money, to be claiming energy costs for their second homes, including people like Ed Miliband, including people like Rachel Reeves, you just go, what are you thinking?
Yeah, no, look, it is really, to be honest, you would have thought that that Labour would have been, if nothing else, a little bit more careful about how they behaved initially, given the relative, okay, they've got a massive majority, but on very low popularity. What I find breathtaking is just the shamelessness with which they have behaved, whether it's taking millions from the unions and then effectively giving the trades unions pretty much everything they wanted without, I mean, look at the railway, without any further productivity.
That's ridiculous, isn't it?
With these Spanish practices still in place, and the first thing ASLEF then announces they're going to do more strikes. And the RMT now say, well, what about us? We settled for less, and now we want more. The problem is just caving into literally to your paymasters. Actually is not even delivering anything for the people of this country. So no, I think that people clearly fed up with the last government for reasons that we've talked about, and argue against that. But I have to say, I think we're going to be in a mess for the next few years with this Labour government.
I mean, I get a lot of comments. I get an awful lot of comments, Bob, from people saying, it took the Tories 14 years to become as unpopular as they did. Labour seem to have done it in about 6 weeks, because they have. Yeah. I mean, they're incredibly unpopular.
That's quite an achievement, but I mean, more for us for letting it happen, and more for the media for not putting the Labour Party under any sort of serious questioning when they were running for office. They literally staged them, and we didn't know what they believed, and now we do. But hey, look.
But to be honest, I think they were quite misleading. I think plenty of people tried to put them under scrutiny. I mean, I asked an awful lot of questions whenever they would come on, but of course the Labour government now, when they're in, don't come on at all. I think I've had one conversation with one Labour minister in all the time that they've been in government, and they just stay away from places where they think they might get questioned in a way they're not very happy with.
And you're right, and well done you for doing that. Absolutely, and there are some good exceptions to that. And the fact is that they simply lied. They didn't tell us what they were going to do about winter fuel. No. But look, we've now got to put this. We still have to put a decent alternative, and we still have to make sure that we get the right candidate, because if we don't, we're not going to make any progress. We're still going to have Labour in 6 years' time, with it being even more unpopular. But if the Conservatives and small C Conservatives are still divided between Reform and Conservative Party, we will let them in for another terrible 5 years on top of the next few years that we're going to have anyway. And
who's your kind of person, if you've decided yet, that you'd like to see in charge of the Tories?
Kemi, look, we need to, if we don't elect somebody from the Conservative side of the Conservative Party, so on site to the right of the party, I think we're finished, because I think Reform will overtake us. So with great respect to all the candidates, I'm not going to speak in negatives, but if we don't get the right candidate, we're in serious trouble. So, and I think the two people who can rescue us, can turn us around, I think Jenrick and Kemi, because they're both Conservatives. But for me, Kemi is a conviction Conservative, has been from the day one. She's been fighting woke stuff. She's been fighting political correctness. She has been a clear Conservative, and that is basically what we need. Yeah. I think in many ways we're back where we were in the 1970s. You're running out of road with a system of government that's failed us, and we need a really significant restart, whether that's on ending mass immigration, whether it's actually on building prisons, whether it's on getting taxes down. We really need a very, very clear sense of where we stand. We need to park our tanks right on Reform's lawn and then say to Reform, what are you going to do? Reform there's no secret to Reform's success. It was people, fed up Conservatives, who felt that the Conservative Party either wasn't Conservative or wasn't delivering. It's not about moving to the right or lurching to the right. It's actually about being a Conservative Party and delivering on our, common sense, sensible promises, and making sure that people are very clear in what we understand, in what we stand for. And if you don't get that, if we talk right and act left, then, the last election is what happens. Yeah. And I don't blame Conservative voters for saying, I'm not going to come out and support you guys and girls because you haven't done what you said you were going to do.
Yeah, and I think also a lot of people voted for Reform because they were sick to death of the way that the Conservative Party had become so wet and so many backbenchers. And I don't include you. Obviously, I've always thought of you as one of the more sensible members of the party and MPs. But so many people, they're all about net zero. They're all about, welcoming people into the country and not being too horrible to, illegal migrants because, we're supposed to be a welcoming country for everyone to come and seek refuge in it. And, a kind of weird governmental, even economic policy, which was nothing like Conservative policy. I'm pleased to hear you say that you want to stay towards the right of the party, because I still hear, even today, an awful lot of people saying, oh, well, the centre ground is where we win elections. Well, not necessarily anymore, because that's not what's happening in the rest of Europe.
No, you're right there. Actually, Mrs Thatcher, as ever, made a really sensible point when she was alive. She didn't talk about the centre ground, she talked about the common ground.
Yes.
And I think the common ground for the overwhelming majority of people in this country, regardless of their ethnic background, colour of their skin, etc., is that migration has to be controllable and in numbers that we can cope with. And that means an awful lot less than now. It means that police have to be supported to police, that, people shouldn't be rioting, but you need to have a clear and consistent set of standards, not one set of standards if you riot over this and another set of standards if you riot over that. No. You can't have your when people were rioting over Black Lives Matter, mainly white people actually, and you had politicians going down on their knee, that was just shameful.
I know.
And a lot of these organisations are not what they have appeared to be. So actually, what we need to do is be seen to be common sense conservatives and actually having a common ground that we all collectively, or most of us collectively, share. That is different from some mushy sort of liberal approved sort of Guardian, BBC approved centre ground, which seems to be pretty meaningless.
Yeah.
So we need a common ground of where we stand, and most of us know what that is.
Yes, exactly right. One final one. What about Rishi Sunak? Where is he, and why is he not saying anything? I mean, people are starting to wonder if he's gone to America, is he not coming back? I mean, he's still technically leader of the opposition. I know Parliament's not in session right now, but there's been quite a few sort of, you know, massive stories going on in the world of politics. But he's literally not been heard from.
Yeah, look, I think to be fair to Rishi, I think he's spending time with his family. I think he inherited a really difficult situation, and actually he did do lots of good things, but because of we got immigration so badly wrong, I just don't think we were listened to. So I do think he has a right to take time off. Look, he fought a dreadful campaign, and he's going to have to, you know, carry that burden. But I do think the guy has time off. The important thing now is that we get, hopefully, Kemi in, and as soon as we possibly can, we can actually start making some progress, because this government is, I mean, the litany of mistakes, the litany of lies over the winter fuel payments, the litany of unpopularity. Like on the Isle of Wight, it's almost like they have immediately done everything, the Labour Party's done everything they can to make themselves as unpopular as possible, whether it's policing, whether it's over concreting over the island, whether it's over winter fuel payments, which a lot of pensioners around the country, but especially here, are gonna suffer with. I mean, they are brazenly incompetent and dishonest already.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one bit of good news for you. Barry has sent this in. He says, it's a shame Bob Seeley lost his seat. He would have probably been a good candidate for the Tory leadership. Well, there you go. There's life in the old dog yet, perhaps. Good to talk to you, Bob. Thanks very much indeed. Bob Seeley there talking an awful lot of common sense from the Isle of Wight.